Welcome to this presentation on punctuating quotations. Before we get going, I want to talk through some specific terms that you need to understand. The first one is quotation. Most of us are pretty familiar with this term. And a quotation is a set of words that are said or written by somebody else. And because they're the exact words of someone, you put them in quotation marks. The quotation marks are a signal to the reader that, hey, these are the words of someone else, not the author. And then a tag, when we're talking about it in regards to quotations, a tag is a set of words that tells us who said or wrote the quotation. Like she said, he claimed, Mark cried, that kind of thing. And a tag has two parts: a verb that shows how something was said, and the second part is the person who said it. So like she said it, she is the person who said it, said is the verb. So here are some examples. And what you're going to notice is that the tags always have who's talking and a verb, but the order can be switched up. Sometimes the verb comes first, sometimes the verb comes second. And that is entirely dependent upon what sounds best or is most appropriate in the context of the sentence you're writing. And you'll see in each of these examples, I'm trying to show you that there are two pieces: who's talking plus the verb. Now, the first two, like Juan said, stated, may, said and stated are really commonly used. So is argued, said, stated, argued. As long as you remember that you can use those, you're going to be good. You are going to want to think of additional verbs if you're saying the same thing every time. If you say said a million times, it's going to get boring and annoying. You'll want to vary them up. So most of the time, mixing between like stated and argued is enough. But if you're doing a lot of tags, you're going to need to vary up the verb you used. And the second two examples, they argued and yelled the crowd. Those are what I'm trying to show you in those examples is that the verb changes how you're going to read the quotation it's attached to. So like yelled the crowd. If you read that tag and then a quotation, it's going to put in your head that whatever is in the quotation was yelled. So remember, the verb shifts how we read the quotation. All right, now that we have those words down, we're going to talk about three different patterns that you're going to see tags and quotations come in. And before we look at the specific patterns, there are some rules for attaching tags to quotations. You will, when you have a tag and a quotation, you always separate them with a comma. So like in the example, Marshall said, I like dogs, but cats are smelly. The tag and the quotation are separated by that comma. Now, where you put punctuation, like the comma and the end punctuation, the period, this depends upon if the punctuation comes at the beginning of the quotation or at the end of the quotation. So like the period at the end, if it comes at the end of a quotation, then it goes on the inside. So here, the period went inside the quotation marks. Now, if the punctuation comes before the quotation at the beginning, it moves to the outside of the quotation. So the inside-outside thing that really matters, you have to pay attention. So let's talk about this pattern one. Marshall said, I like dogs, but cats are smelly. This is probably the most common pattern you're going to see things come at you with, because culturally we prefer to know who said something before we actually hear what they said. And so tags tend to come at the beginning, but that's not the only place that it can come. Tags can also be moved to the end. So you could get the quotation first and then the tag. And you'll notice here in this pattern, the comma is separating the tag and the quotation, just like this one did. But the comma came at the end of the quotation, so it goes on the inside. And then the tag ends a sentence. And so you don't have any quotations there, marks there to worry about. So you just put the punctuation. Then pattern 3 is essentially a combination of patterns 1 and 2, where, and in this case, the tag comes in the middle. Sometimes the tag can interrupt the quotation. So, I like dogs, claimed Marshall, but cats are smelly. And this one, you have to have a lot of punctuation because the tag is meeting the quotation in multiple places. So the first place that they meet, we put a comma, and because it's at the end of the quotation, it goes on the inside. Here, we put another comma between the tag and the quotation, but it's at the beginning, so it goes outside of the quotation. Then we have the end punctuation, and that's at the end of the quotation, so it goes on the inside. You're going to get tired of thinking about inside or outside, but it matters a lot. And that's a lot of what this rule is about, is paying attention to where it goes and remembering that you need it. All right, because the world thought that you needed a challenge, they decided to give you some exceptions to these 3 patterns. And so this first exception is based on the tag touching the quotation. And so these first examples I'm showing you, this is what it looks like normally. The tag touches the quotation. There's nothing in between the tag and the quotation. And that happens a lot, but every now and then you're going to get an exception. So like in this sentence, Smith felt that he could no longer tolerate that type of behavior. We know that Smith is talking, but we don't have the speaker plus a verb to be the tag. It's just grammatically integrated into the sentence. This is really sophisticated. It's smooth, it's lovely, but we don't have a tag, so you don't put a comma there. The only punctuation on that one would be the period at the end. Sometimes you are going to see that there is a tag, like here, Smith argued. But if even one word separates the tag from the quotation, you don't have to put a comma there anymore. And one of the most common words that gets stuck in there is that. If you see that, it's separating the tag from the quotation. And you don't need a comma there. So that's probably the trickier of the 2 exceptions. The second exception has to do with end punctuation. And I want to remind you before I show you the exception that if the punctuation comes at the end of the sentence and if the quotation is there, it goes on the inside. Now, you're going to have sentences where you have to add parenthetical citations. And that means that you give information in parentheses at the end. And that is saying what source you got the quote from. And when you have a parenthetical citation, you move the period from the inside of the quote to outside of the parentheses, clear at the end. So even if it's a short little one like the 87, you move it from inside by day to clear at the end. And what that's doing is saying, hey, don't forget this parentheses and the information in it applies to the sentence before it. So that's exception 2. And you'll deal with that exception fairly frequently in our class because we cite outside sources. All right, before we end and you go practice this, I want to talk about some ideas about end punctuation. So in this sentence, Clem said, "That is my donut." I've been showing you how you put the period at the end inside. But what if you want to use an exclamation mark or a question mark? You treat those the same way you treat the period when it comes at the end. So like if Clem was really adamant and said, "That is my donut," the exclamation point goes on the inside of the quotation too. If it becomes a question, the question mark goes on the inside. Clem asked, "Where is my donut?" Still goes on the inside. Now, the trickier part is, what if you want a different kind of end punctuation? Like, what if Smith yelled, "I can't tolerate that type of behavior," and you need to put an exclamation point in there? You're going to go, "Oh no, do I put it here with a quote or do I put it at the end?" And how you judge that is, which part is the exclamation? Is the whole thing the exclamation? No, Smith argued is said very calmly, so it only gets a period. It's just the quote that is the exclamation. So you put the exclamation here instead of a comma. You can replace a comma with end punctuation. The second example, what time do you want to leave tomorrow? The question is only the part in the quotation. It's not the whole sentence. The tag is not part of a question. So the question mark goes inside the quotation. So now it's time to go practice all of these ideas on the exercises.